So our talk is titled this morning, Mistakes and Consequences. And in Science of Mind, we teach, and I absolutely stand behind this philosophy. I stand behind the idea that there is no punishment, but there is consequence for our choices. Ernest Holmes says there is no sin but a mistake. There is no punishment but a consequence. And that, for me, like Beth said when she came to Science of Mind and started learning all these fabulous ideas that are taught here, this for me was one of the ideas that stood out. Of course, they all do. If we think one way and then someone presents something else that really kind of makes sense, and the words of Ernest Holmes back it up, and you get to prove it for yourself, well, I just began proving things for myself. And that is the joy of life for me. So Ernest Holmes also says, God makes no mistakes. All mistakes then rest in humankind. Doesn't make us bad, as Beth said, but it does make some of the behaviors that we have or the words that we speak not resonate and vibrate at the energetic level with which we would see our end goal. So in Science of Mind, we're looking at that end goal and setting ourselves up, David and I call it PA, planning ahead with our thoughts to match our actions and words for what we desire. Ernest Holmes says we must declare that no mistakes have been made, none are being made, and none are going to be made. Now that's the ultimate place that we want to be. However, he says, if mistakes have been made, we must neutralize their effect by the direct declaration that they no longer have power over us. So whenever we are subject to having an awareness that we have made a mistake, we have the power to shift it for ourselves. We are loving spiritual beings. We are intended to be happy and to be healthy. And as long as we make mistakes, we will continue to suffer the inevitable consequence of those choices. And the only reason for that is because that's the way law works. That's the way life works. It's not ever because there is some being or entity outside of us that is punishing us. I know I frequently hear people say, I think God was just trying to teach me a lesson. Well, if that's true, that was you trying to teach you a lesson. Because there is no being, no power outside of yourself that's trying to teach you a lesson. Unless, of course, it's your mom and dad, and some of those we absolutely want to put to the wayside, right? We are teaching ourselves the lessons, and we get to choose what works for us. When we experience the consequence of the law, it is never because that higher power is punishing us. And so as we personally, each of us individually and we collectively, turn away from any ideas of destruction, whether that destruction is of a word, a feeling, an action, or a thought, as we turn away from the destructive and turn our mind toward good, we begin the journey of relinquishing the destructive and living our life by constructive means.
There's a great saying that, well, I don't know if it's a great saying, but there's a saying that you can only make a mistake once. The second time is a choice. I like that statement. But it says you can only make a mistake once. But I don't know, most of us have had opportunities in our lives to observe how that same mistake keeps happening over and over and over again. It keeps recurring to us, and I believe until we actually address that mistake and deal with it, it will continue to happen. You know, life is an ongoing process, and we can be running in place or running on a hamster wheel, and that's not really leading us anywhere in the ongoing process. The ongoing process requires that we expand and grow into greater experiences. And if we keep experiencing the same thing over and over and over again, we're not really living, we're just existing. We need to step outside of the hamster wheel and find another idea, awaken to another possibility, and claim it as ours and move in that direction. Here was a idea that I had this week about how awareness creates consequences, or lack of, I guess. I go out to my car, I'm all excited to start my day. I get in my car, and I'm backing out the driveway, and bang! I hit the mailbox. I break my mirror. So, well, here's going to change my consequence. First of all, it's going to be, I need a new mirror. So on my travels today, I adjust everything so I get a new mirror for my car. I come home and I fix my mirror on my car, and no problem. Problem solved. Next day, get in my car, eager to start my day, start backing my car out of the driveway, and bang, thump. I hit the mailbox, break my mirror, and I also break the mailbox. So I said, well, now, one action, two consequences. So I said, I'm going to adjust my day. I'm going to go out and get another mirror and get a mailbox. So I come home and I fix my mirror, fix my mailbox, problem solved. Next day I get in my car, back my car down the driveway, bang, creak, plump. I hit the mailbox, break my mirror, and the mailbox post falls over. 3 consequences, 1 action. So I go and I survey the damage, and I think, you know, there seems to be some kind of a sequence going on here. There seems to be maybe a bigger problem under the surface. And so I get in my car and go on my way, and I get a mirror, a mailbox, and a mailbox post. And when I come back, I put the mirror on the car, put the mailbox on the post, and I move the post 2 feet away. So the next day, I'm in my car, joyously confident that nothing can possibly go wrong today. I'm knowing that everything's taken care of. There are no problems whatsoever as I peacefully back into oncoming traffic.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Oh no, yikes, exactly. The problem was never the physical circumstances or conditions in my environment. The problem was my limited conscious awareness of my surroundings all along. I was not paying attention. I was not holding conscious awareness of where I was and what was happening around me. When I'm consciously aware, I make choices for which I do not have to blame the conditions in my life. The mirror will not serve me if I choose to ignore it. The mailbox and oncoming traffic will not have any effect on me if I am not a cause. I take responsibility for the events and actions of my life and move through life consciously and intentionally, not accidentally. I know my choices and actions create consequences, positive or negative. This is really actually based on two events. I actually have had 3 people in my life, family and friends, who have backed into things and broken their mirrors. And it happened several times with each of them. And I helped them fix their mirrors, and I said, of course, you realize that this mirror is not going to help anything if you don't use it.
Oh, yeah, it didn't really happen to him.
Didn't have her either.
No. So when we look at how these consequences occur and the things David's talking about, we can put them into a couple of categories: natural consequences and logical consequences. So logical consequences can occur naturally, or they can be imposed upon us by someone in authority. But you've all heard the saying, the consequence must fit the crime. So ideas that we can look at. How about backing up? That could be one. But another one is speeding tickets. That's a great one to think about. There's a consequence for that. We get a ticket usually, unless we're lucky enough to talk our way out of it. But there are also the natural consequences, which we look at in science of mind, which occur due to the nature of law. So example of that would be if you decided you were going to lean back in your chair, it would probably lead to falling over backwards. And that's a natural consequence of the law. Natural consequences are what we in science of mind call results or demonstrations of the laws of nature. So then there's also, using that same example, the idea of children. When they try to tip back on two legs, which I have happen often in the classroom, we use logical consequences, or we hope they are, for them, and we do so for their safety, so that they don't have to suffer the natural consequences of their actions, although sometimes they do, yes? And sometimes even adults do. And some of them actually get pretty good at balancing. But again, that's the consequence of their action, their focus on that balance. Logical consequences should be reasonable, they should be respectful, and they should be connected to the act, which is exactly what natural consequences are. So I find that it's always easier to look at consequences that maybe I don't think are me. So things that are simple and relatable consequences, where we can say, yes, I can see how that works, so that we can eventually get to that point where we can look at something in our own life and how it's showing up. So simple, relatable examples of potential consequences. If we're rude to people, then we may have a difficult time making friends. If we forget our jacket and it's cold outside, not in Florida, then we will probably be cold, or we'll change our plans. If we don't clean our teeth, we might get bad breath, or worse yet, cavities and gum disease. And then it becomes an experiential consequence, because now it's become not only painful, but it's all physically painful, but it's also taps into our pocketbooks and wallets. So as we begin to open our mind to see how consequences take shape and are not a punishment given to us, we begin to start taking responsibility for ourselves and the things in our life that we may want to make a shift in.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about physical consequences, the things that happen to us, and we then experience physical results accordingly. I would like to talk about more of an interpersonal level. We know that our words, thoughts, and intentions are creative, therefore creating consequences. We create our own consequences. As science of mind practitioners, or people who practice this teaching and these principles, we consciously practice conditioning our thoughts to achieve only the highest and best that we wish to experience in our lives, so that only the highest and best actually manifest or reveal in our lives. Life does not act upon us or react to us. It responds to what we hold in consciousness. So we are always at choice of the consequences that we receive, or that come about as a result of our reactions. There's a saying I saw recently, I think it's a good illustration. It says, no one can destroy iron, but its own rust can. Likewise, no man can destroy a person, but their own mindset can. We let into our consciousness and hold on to different things that it can affect the conditions in life. As Deborah was talking about healthy mental hygiene, we can clean up our mental hygiene and prevent consequential mental decay. So brush up your spiritual practices and eliminate any cavities of mental decay that you may have, thereby producing positive consequences.
Absolutely, great. So how about when you're watching a movie? Have you ever had an experience when you were watching the movie where you just knew what that character in the show was going to say or do next? And you may have even right out loud said, "Don't do it, don't do it," because you knew what the consequence was going to be. I think this is a perfect example of showing us how to clean up the mental decay, because it's so easy to observe it when it's someone else. And how about our own kids, if you have children or family members or grandchildren, that you just know what their consequence is going to be, but it doesn't matter what you think, what you say. You don't suffer the consequence. They do, and they get to make their choice just like we do. But we can look at our own. We can use this idea of how when we observe, there's such a great clarity for us. We can use this as a huge hint in our own life that we want to gain clarity prior to jumping into any decisions that we may be making in our own situations.
Yeah, sin, punishment, guilt, all those kind of things are things where you're kind of twisted in our thinking from our childhood experiences and what we've been taught. Science of mind, we say that God does not punish, despite what we have been told. God is source or law that we freely use or misuse. God is the realm of possibility and the great online Amazon warehouse, and we activate it. When we activate it, we're responsible for the consequences. God really doesn't care any more than Amazon how we use those things that manifest for us. The law simply responds without opinion or judgment. The Dalai Lama says, the reality of the world today is that grounding ethics in religion is no longer adequate. This is why I'm increasingly convinced that the time has come to find a way of thinking about spirituality and ethics beyond religion altogether. I think that's a powerful statement, not relying on what we learned in our religious teachings, but what is common sense to us. We know that we create what we hold in consciousness. We are co-creators with source energy, with the law, and there are no sides. We're doing it together.
Yeah, so that means that you can't be upset about the results you failed to get from the work you didn't do. Our happiness is entirely dependent upon how we view the world and how we view life in general. Albert Einstein said, "Stay away from negative people. They have a problem for every solution." Some more powerful words from a great person. And I will add on to that I believe we also don't want to be the negative person who can't let go of what we experience as a problem, because then we are not able to see the solution. We become part of the problem as long as we hold on to it. We want to think from where you know good. Think from that prayerful state of mind. And Frank touched on that from the reading today too. We use prayer as a teaching tool in science of mind to shift consciousness. We call it treatment. Reverend Kathy Ann Lewis recently posted this: prayer is not a spare tire that you pull out when you are in trouble. Use it as a steering wheel that keeps you on the right path throughout your life. We get to steer, to guide our magnificent vehicle that we came here to share with the world.
I found a fascinating quote on the internet, and it's not exactly accurate, so it applies in several ways. First of all, it applies to using the consequences of using the internet to find our truth. Very likely probably won't find it there, but it has to do with quantum physics. And here's what it says. According to quantum physics, a particle vibrating due to your sound of your voice can attract a molecule inside a star at the edge of the universe instantly. This phenomenon is known as quantum entanglement. The greatest illusion is the illusion of separation. Now that sounds pretty good and it's pretty close to right, but it's not exactly quantum physics, and it's not exactly what's saying quantum physics. So I'm going to say it again with the way it would probably be said in quantum. According to quantum physics, a particle vibrating due to your resonating with your thought energy can attract a molecule inside a star billions of miles away instantly. This phenomenon is known as quantum entanglement. The greatest illusion is the illusion of separation. The thing is that your thoughts create the words that you speak. Thoughts preclude words. And so the very energy of a thought will actually have enough power in the universe to attract energy from a molecule billions of miles away, because we know in quantum there is no space or time, so there cannot be an edge to the universe. So, but basically the understanding is still the same, that we hold an idea in mind and it reacts with everything around us from here where I am to every space within the universe. And so we we receive consequences as a result of whatever we think about.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard someone say about a family member, well, that's just the way that she is, and so we just all tiptoe around whatever her mood is. And I thought, oh, that does not resonate with me very well. That's not going to happen. No, I'm going to be a part of creating the thought that shifts that. Because we don't have to live in chaos. We don't have to live in relationships that don't bring us great joy and happiness. And it doesn't always mean we have to leave the relationship. Sometimes, and I used to tell my children, it only takes one of you. When one person shifts, there is a shift. If it can happen to the stars, it can happen to each other. So becoming cognizant of our mistakes and the consequences of them allows us to become honest with ourselves and learn to use law for good. So friends, remember, you are the face of God in your world, and your choices have consequences. Make them positive. And so it is.
So it is.